Hey, David Brewster here, new episode of Chordplay. This is the Chords of Gong, and I've had some requests to feature this legendary psychedelic progressive rock, space rock band. A very interesting group. Some of their music is very strange, but I like it. And Gong formed in Paris, France in 1967. It was David Allan, the late great guitarist and frontman, also Gillian Smith. They came together. David had actually left the band Soft Machine, and he was moving back to England, but he wasn't able to because I think his visa expired or something, or his passport. There was some kind of issue. So instead of moving back to England, he moved to Paris, France. And that's basically where Gong, was formed and where they started and where they came from. So it's interesting to notice like British progressive rock relocating to France. And then this is kind of the result of that. So if you're a Gong fan or a prog rock, psychedelic, space rock fan, buckle up. Here we go. So I'll be honest, the Gong history is very confusing. The timeline, the different incarnations, member changes, stylistic shifts. And aside from the band Gong, there's also Pierre Moerlen's Gong, there's Gongzilla, Mother Gong, New York Gong. There's all these different incarnations of the band. So here's kind of a simple timeline, at least showing like the basics. And just keep in mind, there's a lot of other, kind of side projects and mutations of Gong. But here's their basic timeline. So the late great guitar legend Allan Holdsworth actually appears on a number of Gong-related albums, and somewhere around 1974 Gong broke up and the drummer Pierre Moerlen took over and rebooted the band, and it became more like a jazz fusion kind of thing, and that's when Allan Holdsworth entered the picture. And Allan appears on 3 of those albums with Pierre Moerlen. The original release, Gazoos, which the American version is Espresso. Allan also appears on Espresso 2, and the album Time is the Key. And then Allan, fast forward about a decade or more, and then Allan also appears on the Gongzilla project, which that's really cool, even though it doesn't really sound anything like Gong. But of course, Allan's just tearing it up on that album. But, for the Holdsworth fans out there, there's definitely a Holdsworth connection with Gong's legacy. Okay, one more nugget I wanted to add to this lesson, and when else could I talk about this other than the Gong episode, which I just found this so cool. I was doing the research and putting this episode together, and I discovered that Sherman Hemsley, also known as George Jefferson from the Jeffersons, but Sherman Hemsley was a huge prog rock fan. He loved Gong. He was also into Gentle Giant and Caravan and some bands like that. A big prog rock fan. Also, Sherman was a jazz keyboardist, and he recorded an entire album with John Anderson from Yes, but that album is still unreleased. I don't know if they're ever going to release it, but I found that so cool. And then Sherman Hemsley actually loved the Flying Teapot album, and he loved that album so much he actually had a room in his house that was decorated Flying Teapot, and there was an eternal looped, I think it was like a reel-to-reel of Flying Teapot that played in that room 24/7. And when I found that out, I was like, Sherman Hemsley was a Gong fan? No way. So the music and chord-based examples in this episode came from 5 Gong-related albums, and I wanted to include music from both kind of eras, at least, the original psychedelic Gong, and then the Pierre Moerlen kind of fusion Gong. I had to feature Allan Holdsworth again, are you crazy? But I wanted to kind of, really serve up an assortment of different sounds and ideas here. A little bit of Steve Hillage, some David Allan, and also Allan Holdsworth too. So anyway, buckle up. Here we go. Alright, with the opening, that's the song Night Illusion from Gazoos, and that's Allan Holdsworth on guitar. And some of you might be wondering, wasn't that Steve Vai on guitar? Because it noticeably does sound a lot like Steve Vai. But you have to think, Gazoos came out in 1976. Eventually Steve Vai started working with Frank Zappa, but then Vai's album Flexible didn't come out until 1984, and that riff totally sounds like something that could appear on Flexible, but it's Allan Holdsworth playing with gong. And Night Illusion's really cool, like this. Something like that. So we're in A right there for that opening riff, and you distinctly hear the low E hammered onto that A note there on the low E string. So it's like a gradual thing with that A5, like that. So I'm playing just really the single low E hammer onto that A note. Then you're playing 2 notes of that A5 power chord, and then 3. So it's kind of a, like that. And then right there, you're basically holding down that A note. You're going to hammer on that B to C sharp. So you're forming that A major, part of that triad there. Like that. And then you want to slide that. You're going to slide that up a whole step. And then you're going to basically slide the top part of that A5 power chord the second time. So it's really interesting to hear these slippery parts of the chord being shifted. Like that. And then as soon as you do that slide with that A5, go right back to that first riff again. Then you hear it move to F right there, and then a melody right there. Really interesting song. Of course, it keeps going right there. Really interesting song, and the first time I ever heard that, I was like, that sounds like Steve Vai. Really cool. Okay, next up's the song Esnuria. This is also from the album Gazoos, and once again, Allan Holdsworth on guitar, and it's the slippery kind of power chord riff, something like this. Something like that. So we're sliding this D sharp, the C sharp to D sharp right there, and then that D sharp's going to go all the way up to F sharp right there. A little bit of vibrato there when you get back to that D sharp, and then right there it's basically C sharp 5 to a G sharp over basically that C note right there. Like that. So it's really interesting to hear that kind of shift. You can also hear like that lower G sharp. I don't think the guitar is actually playing that. You could add it in there. With that lower G sharp in there. But that's that first riff. That little melody. Something like that. It's kind of built on fifths. Interesting melodic thing after that kind of busy power chord riff. Alright, next up's the song Heavy Tune. This is from the album Espresso 2, and this is Allan Holdsworth on rhythm guitar, and it's actually Mick Taylor on lead guitar. I just featured Mick Taylor, a few weeks ago in a Soloing Secrets, but it's really interesting to hear Allan play this way. It's just almost like a straight ahead kind of rock thing. Like that. So we're basically just climbing up power chords, E, F, F sharp into that G. And then you're going to slide that F to G. A little bit of vibrato, kind of shake it and then slide it off. And then you're going to basically slide into this top part of that B flat major, B flat major chord. But over G, that's like a G minor 7 hiding right there, right? That G to F, G, and then that F to G slide again, and then you're going to basically slide off this part of F major up there, like that. Go right back to that G and F thing. Slide off that top part, and then basically do that G and F again, and then do that chromatic walk up back into G. Okay, this is for Sherman Hemsley. This is actually Flying Teapot from the album Flying Teapot. This doesn't feature Allan Holdsworth. This is actually Steve Hillage and David Allen. And this is weird. Now, the Psychedelic Gong, I'm going to go ahead and admit, Psychedelic Gong is really strange, but I like it because it's so weird and different. But this is something like this. Something like that. So it's weird, it's strange, but we're doing this kind of half step, kind of movement there from that open A. There's actually like a volume swell. It sounds like the open A and that B together. And then you hear that kind of A octave like that. Then you're just sliding that A to B flat and back. And then there's like this kind of weird quirky chord thing. So there's A5 like 4 times. Then right there, move that up a half step, and you're going to keep playing that open A string. So that's like an A flat 6, flat 9 implied, and you basically do that 8 times, and you can hear him like shaking the chord. So it makes this weird kind of almost nervous sounding chord part. Like that. Move that up a whole step, now it's like an implied A minor 7. That up a whole step, now it's an implied A sus4. Move that up a whole step, now it's an A sus2 implied. And then right back to just that single A. There's like Martian vocals and stuff going on. That's a really strange song. Next up, this is from the song Outer Temple from the album Angel's Egg. Definitely one of my favorite Gong albums in the psychedelic prog era. Pretty simple. It's implying basically C-sharp Phrygian, but we're doing this. Really simple stuff there, but it is implying, C-sharp Phrygian. Or D-flat Phrygian. C-sharp, D-flat, however you want to approach that note, that's what we're playing. But we're basically playing that C-sharp 5 and spelling it out. And then right there, basically slide that C-sharp to D and back. Right? And go right back to that C-sharp 5 chord. And then right there, C-sharp, grab that B and then slide that to C-sharp. Right? So we're doing this, kind of encircling that C-sharp root note. Of like modern sounding stuff, but that's really early Gong right there. Now speaking of early Gong, this is Gong Song from the album Magic Brother, their first album, and for a late 60s kind of psychedelic tune, it totally sounds like an alternative rock song from the 90s. Check this out. Box progression, think like Closing Time, some of those songs from the 90s right there, but that C sharp, F sharp, B to G sharp, and you're just kind of banging that out. The last time here, bang out that C sharp, 2 hits on that F sharp, then it's B, then go up to C, then it's C sharp, then D, C sharp, D, C sharp. Really unusual song, but check that out and listen to it and think of the time that it came out. And like I said, fast forward, think of like 90s, and you could actually hear where that song would fit right in like the grungy 90s, which is so cool. Okay, next up's the song Selene from the album Angel's Egg, and this is really cool. So the bass is actually doing this in this song. Like that, and that's the bass guitar, right? So I'm going to use the MXR clone looper here to help me out. So here's the bass guitar, and now I'm going to add the guitar part on top of it. Interesting stuff here. So that is actually an E flat 6. So think E major, but we're adding a flat 6, that C note right there. And your fingers are all kind of lined up like that. And you're going to take that and flip it around the other way like this. And now that's an E add sharp 11. Like that. You just kind of cycle between those two chords. Keep in mind the bass is laying down that E5 and that E sus2. But I like the way those two parts come together. That's really cool. I love parts like that. Teamwork. Last but not least is the song Oily Way from the album Angel's Egg. I'm pretty sure I featured this in the Steve Hillage Chordplay episode from a couple months ago, but I wanted to feature this again because this is one of my favorite like Steve Hillage psychedelic era Gong songs. Or I guess I could say one of my favorite Gong songs that doesn't feature Allan Holdsworth. But something like this. weird, very bizarre, a very strange song, but I love this tune. I just listen to it and it's like, man, I don't know what it is. It's just so different. But two E5s there, spaced out. And he's actually stepping on a wah. Wow, 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 wow. I didn't bust my wah out for this, sorry. But two E5s and then a C sharp minor 7 there. Wow, 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 wow. And then right there, that's a G sharp minor 11. Like that. Really tasty chord there. And then you hear all these flat 5 chords. So there was the beginning, two E5, C sharp minor 7, and then that G sharp minor 11. Wow, wow, wow. And then the G sharp minor 11. And then the flat 5 chords. So C sharp flat 5, E flat 5, G flat 5. And then we're going to hike up to that B flat flat 5 right there. So it's a really unusual progression like that. But then also the way he's playing it. Because you're separating the first 3 notes of the first chord. Then it's the top 2 and then the root of that E flat 5. Then you're going through the 3 notes of that G flat 5. And then you're just sliding into that B flat, flat 5, like that. It reminds me of Primus or Buckethead or something kind of avant-garde. Very strange guitar part. Then you're just banging out those flat 5 chords. And there's the C sharp to E, that G sharp. I think I called that B flat. You could call it A sharp, I guess. But that C sharp, E, G, and A sharp flat 5 chords, like that. And then just end on that E5 again. So very odd song, but like I said, there's just something about that tune. When I hear it, it's like, man, I know this is weird, but I really like it. All right, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with this look at the Chords of Gong. Definitely a very interesting and inspiring band, very strange. Some of their music is very strange, and you might need a Q-tip, after you listen to it and kind of clean out those ears. But there's just something about this band, I don't know. It's unusual, it's very different and unique. Of course, I love Allan Holdsworth, so that connection, that makes sense to me. But then when I listen to some of their weird stuff, it's like, why am I really getting into this? Of course, I love Buckethead and Primus and avant-garde music. But with Gong, it's really interesting because certain songs have that really just crazy, trippy, psychedelic sound. And then other songs have this really form, structure, and melody and groove or whatever. And for music that appeared in the late 60s and early 70s, some of their music almost sounds modern, like music that you hear today, but it's literally, like 50 years old or whatever. So that's really cool to go back and listen to music that obviously back in the late 60s and early 70s, it was way ahead of their time. And in today's world, it almost sounds new. That's really cool. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Nail Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.